So now what we can do is add our material, and this will be the fun part, ladies and gents. So our first Nintendo Switch will be red. So we want our first material to be a red material. I also want to split my displays. So let's split this. On the left hand side, I will have my render. And what we can actually do over here is that we can actually start using our true ISOCAM. And this ISOCAM will basically give us a real good perspective of where everything is. ISOCAM tends to be a very fun object to use. So you can position your ISOCAM in almost any direction you choose to. I'm just affecting the scale, so I'm just zooming out as much as possible. So that's what we'll be working with. So now on the left, obviously I want that to be rendered, but I want everything to be rendered in my favorite rendering engine, in cycles, using my GPU. I want my max render to be around 7,000. I want my noise threshold to be somewhat lower, maybe 0.005. And now because we can't see anything, we've got to add some lighting. But so far, I know what most of this is supposed to look like. So I can actually just hide this object and we can continue working on our object. So let's add some lighting because we desperately need some lighting. Let's bring this light upwards. Let's go to our lighting section on the right and possibly even make this 5,000. So we will have quite a lot of light, to be honest. And what we can do is that we can just duplicate our lighting, continue to duplicate our lighting. So far we've got around 3, and we can actually duplicate this lighting to the back. Let's duplicate it to the back as well. There we go. Let's duplicate a new set of these to the front. So this is good. And let's rotate this on the x-axis a little bit, just forward. So all of this will make it look pretty bright. I won't lie, it will look pretty bright. So now with our face that we duplicated earlier, what we can actually do is that we can bring it forward a little bit, but not by much, literally just a little. So I'd say that's about enough. So we want to bring it forward just a little bit, but definitely not too much. So from top down view, it tends to be much easier. We can bring it forward just like that. And additionally, what we can do is actually we can tab in, we can select all, and we can extrude backwards. This will give the display a nice little edge. This will give it a nice little field of view, which is nice. So you can see while I'm designing, I'm also improvising, and I always advise everyone to improvise. And our display, we can actually extrude we can actually scale up our display just a little bit, scale it a little bit beyond the boundaries, just a little bit, and that tends to look really good. So like I said, our handles, they'll be red. So let's start adding some colors. So this is where it gets fun and rewarding. And of course, our buttons at the top buttons, these will be black. But I must say these buttons are not just any black buttons. If we zoom into our render, by the way, let's turn on denoise in our viewport, and that will be in our rendering engine. And if we go back to our material, so a spectacle can actually affect this by quite a lot. So these buttons, they tend to be a little bit soft on consoles. So you don't want the roughness to be too high, but you don't want the spectacle to be too high either. And I think that looks pretty good. So with the buttons on the left side, it's the exact same thing, black buttons. But this is literally the fun part of the course where you get to experiment. Most of these buttons are black anyway. So we can use similar materials for a majority of these buttons or most of these buttons. The buttons on the top right there, they're black as well, but you can literally choose whichever colors you'd like. This is the nice thing about Blender, is that you can do whatever you'd like with this software. It's completely free, but in a short period of time, we've managed to create a really nice Nintendo gaming console just by using some simple shapes, simple geometry. The back of the display is also black. Now this is a slightly different black. We can actually make this a little bit more metallic if we like. We can actually give it a slightly different effect, and we can actually turn down the spectacle a little bit. So if we zoom in into our object on our viewport, we can actually affect the roughness now, and that's a pretty important part. In this object, it's not too rough because I think most of it is plastic anyway, but I'm making it look a little bit plastic while looking also a little bit metallic. But of course, these things, we can always change them up once again. So with this will also be black, but it's a different type of black. So we really want this to be a different shade. So that already looks pretty good, to be honest. But if we turn down the spectacle, you can clearly see it affects the object in some very interesting ways. We can probably turn down the roughness as well, so it basically looks a bit more like plastic. And indeed, so we don't want our metallic to be too high. These shades are not the same, but we want them to be easy to differentiate, but we don't want them to be the exact same. So that tends to look pretty good. So this is where you can do whatever you'd like. Actually, you don't have to follow my instructions anymore, but it would be good if you do follow my instructions, and then you can duplicate all of this and change it around if you'd like. So that's our viewport. Now we want to add a game. So if we go into shading, this is our object that we've created. Let's save our document. Control S to save your document. We don't want it to get lost. Let's create a new material, and we'll add an input. We will add a texture. Let's add an image texture right there, and connect the color to the base color of the principal. So once you go to open, I've downloaded some games already, so we can basically put whatever game we'd like. A game that I'm really excited for, obviously, is Hogwarts Legacy. I don't necessarily think this will be on the Nintendo Switch, but we can still try. We can still try if we'd like. So now we are in UV editor, and what we can do is just scale this out on the x-axis, and we can actually scale it upwards on the y-axis. And from there on out, it actually looks pretty good. So that basically took us a small amount of time, and so far so good. It looks really lovely. Now our home button will be black as well. It looks like with our home button, we can probably extrude it a little bit more forward. So before we can add an icon to this object, we need to tab in, select the face. We want to intrude the face just a little bit, and then we can actually just separate this face. So P for separate, and we separate this face. If we click on the face, now we can go into shader, and we can create new material right there. So if we go to our downloaded section and we go to our icons, we connect the color to the base color, and if we go into UV, and if we go into our UV editor, we can click on our face selector right there, and there we get this. So now we should be able to hover this above the home button, and we should be able to zoom this down. So if you want to resize your circle, you can actually resize it on the z-axis, y-axis, z-axis, x-axis, anything really. And then we can try to center it as much as possible and reshape it a little bit more on the y-axis. So if we go back into our layout, we see that the buttons have changed color. So our objects have changed color. Sometimes you run into problems like this and it's affected our entire object. What we need to do is to delete there, create a new color, and let's just call this black buttons 02. And what just happened there is because and that was my mistake right there. I should have known and created the material, but we can easily create it once again. Now with this button right here, we can tab in, and we just want to extrude backwards a little bit, and we can go and we can actually scale it up that much little bit. We don't want to scale it too much, of course, but if we go back into UV view, what we can do, we can click on everything and bring it down just a little bit, and this should make it that more. Go back into UV view, let's bring this down. So there, our button looks pretty good. So that's our home button. Now I've created new material for the rest of the buttons, and we can just go ahead and select our new material. So those are some basic material, and we just created all of this in a short period of time. So now what we can do, we can actually just add a plane to the actual floor. Let's scale this plane up. Let's bring it down, of course. Let's bring it below our object. And from the top view, we can then scale this. We can scale it out just like that. From here, we can zoom out a little bit more and save everything. So let's create a floor color, and we can use whatever floor color we'd like. So yellow tends to look pretty good, but we can do whatever we'd like, blue, anything. But I'm digging the yellow. I'm digging the yellow, and we can make this a little bit metallic. We don't want it to be too rough. We can bring the spectacle down as well, not too much of course, but that's looking pretty lovely. So that right there is our Nintendo Switch. From here on out, we can basically do whatever we'd like. We can take all of this, select everything. So once we got everything selected, we can then rotate this on the x-axis. We can affect it in that way. Then we can actually move it. We can actually make it a lot bigger if we'd like. From here, we can actually move this object around just a little bit more, and we can duplicate this object. And because it's duplicated, we can then rotate it a little bit more. We can rotate it and lay it down. So we can actually end up having two objects. And we can move this object along if we would like. So select everything on this side. And let's deselect the lights because I don't need the lights, but we just like to rotate this a little bit more. So I'm just bringing this up into the edge a little bit more, just like that. But if we did make this object bigger, this is how it would look. So we can change the sizing of our object if we like, but it's not absolutely necessary. So there our object is on the ground. So now we've got two consoles, and they're in different sizes. So now what we can do, we can change around the colors of our consoles. So now if we go to shader, we can actually change the game that was on our console. So what I want is a new material, and let's add a image shader right there, or image texture. And in our downloaded section, I will leave all of these for you to download so you can use whichever one you'd like. We can add Fortnite just like that. So that's pretty cool. So let's go into our UV shader. Let's click on the display, and everything is perfectly aligned. So I don't need to do anything in that regard. But with these colors now, we can actually change the colors now. So if I want the right controller to be a different color, I can. So we can actually just leave this in white. So that actually looks pretty good, leaving this in white. So that works perfectly. Let's bring the spectacle down. Let's bring the roughness down, and we want a new color for this side. So mint looks a little bit nice. Also neon looks a little bit nice, but we kind of want something that pops. I think the lavender purple pops. The blue absolutely looks great as well. So that actually looks good. The white and blue does look good. So let's save that, and we can actually tab in to get some more information just to see if there's anything left that we need to do. What we can actually do is just select this edge, Alt to select, and we can actually affect it like that. Let's see how would this affect our object. So from the right hand side, let's see how it would affect it. So that's actually really interesting. So we can do simple things like this just to change it all around. And obviously I've got materials for these buttons as well, so you can actually add those materials if you'd like. So I've decided that it's probably best to go with the blue. I've just randomly decided that it's probably best to go with the blue. So for now, we're gonna go with the blue. So that looks about well. So that's pretty well done. So now we can actually just render out our image. And obviously this is from the cube we left over, so we need to delete that object. So for any hidden objects, we can finally just delete them all. It's a good habit to name your files, but I haven't named anything, but it is a good habit to name things, especially once your project starts to become bigger or more complex. So let's try to render our image once more, and there we are, looking far better. But I think we can perhaps do a little bit better with our camera. We can perhaps zoom out just a little bit more just to give it that full effect. So I've decided that's what we'll go with. I think this looks pretty good. This gives me enough room to make a thumbnail, so I've got to think about all of these things. But I'd say that looks pretty good. So round of applause to you for completing this course if you've gotten this far. Seriously, brilliant job. Good job. I think we did absolutely amazing. Thank you all for watching. Remember to share your own work in the community page, in the project and community page. Share your own work, share your own project. What have you created? And if there's anything you've learned, let us know. But I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I will see you in our next video.